Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another weekly fighting roundup. And so, if you're new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like video if you do need a like video, and let's get straight into it. So, of course, starting off with the boxing news, and so the WBC have ordered Foster versus Conceição 2, a fight in which I definitely believe should happen again. It was a great fight the first time with Foster's style. They're always going to gel as a fight, and it did. And Foster was unfortunate to not have gotten the win, but he looks so distraught and everything. So it's really nice to see that he hasn't had to work his way back up to warrant a rematch, as they are, like I say, ordering it now. Golden Boy of Top Rank have partnered with Riyadh Season, so it seems like everybody is now. Even Boxer have a little bit. I don't know if they've officially partnered with him, but of course they've got the likes of Tyler Denny fighting on that UK card. So it seems like all the promoters have pretty much at the moment, and it's not surprised me. The only one in which haven't are PBC, which also doesn't surprise me because they have their deal with Amazon Prime and everything like that. So it seems as though they don't want to shift everything over to the zone. And everything's still so new with Amazon Prime, they don't want to do everything like that. So we'll see. PBC are doing really well with their stuff at the moment and putting on some great fights and have a great selection of fighters, but at some point they might have to give in, and we'll wait and see if that is the case. Crawford wants Canelo next. Of course, he has to beat Madrimov, which is happening this week now, but he has to, beat him, and then he wants Canelo next. Canelo, obviously, his fight, which I'm going to talk about a bit more, being announced. Um, I mean, His Excellency is all for it. Am I a massive fan of it? I mean, it's a huge fight, but it's just at the same time there is such a big weight difference between the two of them. But at the same time, there could be a skill thing for Crawford that perhaps nicks him a win or anything. I don't believe I could ever see Crawford stopping Canelo. But it's a huge fight. Money wise, it makes sense. I understand why it might be happening, and it seems as though that's what both fighters want realistically. Brown will fight August 12th. Moten will fight August 24th. Moten will also fight August 24th. WBA's president wouldn't be against letting Paul versus Chavez Jr. be for a championship. Uh, I'm never really a massive fan of the whole kind of bodies, but Paul versus Chavez Jr. for a championship just makes zero sense. But like I say, they're not against him. Canelo will fight Berlanga September 14th. Like I say, that fight got announced. The likes of Benavidez weren't very happy with that. But as a fight, it's not amazing. I don't necessarily believe Berlanga is at a point in which he's ready to fight a Canelo. I always respect Canelo for everybody he faces because he is, obviously there's talks of him, not fighting a Benavidez and stuff like that, but he's never shied away from a lot of the top contenders, a majority of the top contenders, and Berlanga's up there, so I'm not against it. It's, I'm sure, going to be a good fight, and September 14th, every time you see Canelo, it's going to be entertaining, and you always think in the back of your mind, is this the last Canelo fight and stuff like that? But I doubt it will be. But nonetheless, it's a great fight. Probably will be a great fight, fingers crossed. And yeah, I'm here for it. Benavidez has vacated the WBC interim at super middleweight title, so he's now focusing on the light heavyweight scene. Lubin has pulled out of the Zoo IBF purse bids. Munguia has reportedly joined Top Rank, which is a huge signing for them. Munguia was built as a top rank fighter and was really, really backed by them, and now it's seemingly they're gone. That's a big fighter for Golden Boy to lose and Top Rank to gain realistically. And Munguia is set to fight Bazinian in September 20th, which I think is an excellent fight. I've been calling for Bazinian to get a big fight for a long time, and now that would be happening. That's, like I say, a huge fight. Chisora says he'll have two more fights. I'm going to talk a bit more about his win in just a moment, but he says nonetheless he is having two more fights. Davis is in talks to fight Stevenson in November. Obviously, everything that's happened with Lomachenko not really wanting to fight Davis at the moment, now has stepped in Stevenson. So maybe Lomachenko's done this on purpose because the fight to make is the Stevenson one, and now the talks are going ahead, which is excellent. Moving on, Fisher will fight Rudenko August 24th. Nakatani has signed a new deal with Top Rank. Castro vs Acosta. Giasov versus Para. and Lugo vs Corona will fight 31st of July. That's actually Wednesday. I think it's like after the public workout for Crawford Madrimov, which is a really interesting concept. I'm not against it at all. But yeah, it's an interesting concept. Caitlin will fight Udofia September 14th. Watson versus Zapatosna, and Welland will fight September 27th. Great to see Zapatosna progressing, and since the win, the huge win versus Courtney, she's now gotten this European opportunity versus Watson now. EBU have ordered Weiss versus McKinson. IBF have stripped Canelo, so they've seemingly going to order that Skull versus Shushchenko, or don't know if I pronounced his name right. It's IBF being weird again. Como Simpson, Sims Jr., Fundora and Iriarte will fight August 10th. Thompson versus Wilson Bent. Mould versus Walsh, and Gallagher versus Ellis Willits will fight September 27th. As somebody who I spoke to, both Thompson, Wilson Bent and Ellis Willis, all in excellent fights, and that main event is going to be a great fight. McIntyre won via TK round 4 versus Rivetti. Mao Yu won via TK round 1 versus Murphy. Fletcher won via TK round 3 versus Manuel. Waterman won via unanimous decision versus Miller to become Australian light heavyweight champion. Huni won via TK round 2 versus Pilcher to remain WBO global heavyweight champion, and realistically for Huni, he had to win that one really impressively. From his last performance where he looked a bit shaky, got hurt into the later rounds, he really had to come back to his home country, go against one of the guys who was, there to fight. He was game, he was a good tough opponent, but he had to show his levels above, and he did that really well, and got a nice stoppage, and has now put himself back into the mix. I don't know what level necessarily he should go into, but like I say, a good mix to be in around, and probably will be going back out to Saudi soon, no doubt. Moving on, Wallin won via KO round 1 versus Wareem. Mejia won via KO round 4 versus Abarca. Benito won via KO round 2 versus Land. Navarro won via unanimous decision versus Rivera. Verduzco won via unanimous decision versus Davis. Palmer won via unanimous decision versus Pucheta. Trinidad won via KO round 10 versus Slavinsky to remain WBC Continental American Featherweight Champion. Amir Canyon won via split decision versus Yeritzian to become WBC Continental American Welterweight Champion. Mercado won via stoppage round 3 versus Sarmiento. McElroy won via unanimous decision versus Floyd. Perkins won via unanimous decision versus Faye. Al-Mashadi won via TK round 1 versus Romay. Shackelford won via unanimous decision versus Russ 2. Pankey won via unanimous decision versus Paisley. Worthington won via stoppage round 2 versus Kiss. Rivera won via split decision versus Roldon. Smith won via split decision versus Ergashev. Shields won via TK round 2 versus Lepage Joannis to become WBC and WBF heavyweight and WBO world light heavyweight champion. And to speak about that card, which was an interesting one, the Rivera win was a close win. I mean, it wasn't really an excellent fight for him because his opponent wasn't, in my opinion, anything too crazy. He was just quite in your face, and he had that shot lined up a long time, that shot in my opinion, which he got him down with into the 10th round, I believe, which was a really nice knockdown, but he could have done that and could have made it a lot more easier for him, but of course he didn't. The Ergashev loss, that's pretty much shot himself from getting a title shot anytime soon, and that was, again, it wasn't really it was just a poor performance. He was just kind of stood there waiting, stood upright, waiting. Did a nice few counters every so often, but he was just getting caught really easily, just stood tall, not really moving away off the ropes and things like that, and it just was poor, and yeah, that's, like I say, probably makes it unlikely that we ever see him at a top level again. The Shields win, though, got my prediction right for that one. I think I said it would have been like a unanimous decision or something. I don't think that it would be a stoppage, but fair plays to Shields. She moved up in weight, got a stoppage win where people were questioning her power and where the stoppages were in recent years for her, and she went out there and showed that she was level above Lepage Joannis. Obviously, Lepage Joannis, this was a really tough test for her, and it probably was one of the biggest fights ever in the heavyweight division in women's boxing. But at the same time, Shields did what she had to do. It was a really nice head movement before the stoppage, really kind of showing that her speed can still carry. Obviously, we didn't see her go into the later rounds, so we don't know if that's for sure or not, if she can keep a work rate all the way through. But nonetheless, like I say, a very impressive stoppage. And for herself, I don't necessarily know where she's going to go on to next. Like I say, possibly Eleni Daniels or Savannah Marshall rematch, which is always being talked about. But at the same time, she's got a good thing going with Salita Promotions making a headline and putting all the eyes on her. And for the moment, she is doing very well and, like I say, cementing that legacy by just winning more and more belts, even if people aren't always a fan of that. Yeah, fair play to her, all credit to her. Moving on, De Wayo won via points versus Gomez, Hamid won via points versus Velichov, Khan won via points versus Himiani, Lee won via points versus Anchacone, Barney Smith won via unanimous decision versus Barahayas to become WO Youth Super Featherweight Champion. Chapman won via unanimous decision versus Sarabia to remain WBC International Featherweight Champion. Noakes won via unanimous decision versus Bassi. Itoma won via TKO in round 2 versus Watch to remain WBO Intercontinental Heavyweight Champion. Garner won via unanimous decision versus Sharp to remain WBC International Super Featherweight Champion. McCann won via unanimous decision versus Baluta to become EBU European Super Bantamweight Champion. Shizora won via unanimous decision versus Joyce. And to speak about that card, which in my opinion was quite a good British card. I mean, it wasn't a pay-per-view, but I don't think it was worthy of a pay-per-view. But for a Queensberry card, it was another pretty stacked show coming off the one just before. It was, like I say, it was a nice show. And speak about a few of the fights. Itoma, another impressive stoppage for him against Watch, who, you know, has been the rounds with a lot of guys, has went all the rounds with Fraser Clark, and so, you know, that was a good win for him. Another stoppage to add to his resume. He's really progressing as a good heavyweight now, and probably isn't far off getting a big title fight, you know, against the likes of you know, that of like a Johnny Fisher or something like that for like an English title, or, you know, Solomon Dakers as well. There's fights on the table there for him, and he's done really well in that to put himself in that position. And I think if he does get a title fight, it probably will be out in Saudi or one of them Riyadh season cards, because they seem to like him as well. So he's really living up to that high praise, high pressure that he has on him. Garner, I always said that he'd be able to beat Sharp in my opinion. I thought Sharp wasn't going to be able to deal with them kind of, you know, he built himself a resume, but he wouldn't be able to deal with the deep waters in which an actual tough opponent would put him in, and Garner was that guy to do that with the pressure. You know, not the most cleanest of boxing or anything like that, but it doesn't always have to be. Whatever just gets the job done to outshow how kind of man another person, that's what he had to do, and that's what he did really well. McCann as well, an excellent performance from him. Talks about him being, you know, one of the best performances from any British boxer this year, and, you know, I don't know if I'd go that far, but at the same time, he's gone away, got a new team, got on a win, and then come back against a guy who, you know, was seen as the boogeyman and stuff like that, possibly for his career, and gone and got a clear unanimous decision win, really just showing his levels of skill boxing technique wise against a Baluta, who is tough, and he's, you know, gotten some good wins on his resume, and he's always going to be a tough European opponent. But at the same time, McCann is levels above that, and he has to be able to show that, and he did. And getting a draw early on in a career, even a loss early on in a career, there's nothing wrong with that, especially not a European level, because you can go away and you can learn, and then you can come back and put on a much better performance the next time round, and you see that happen quite a lot. And then Shizora, wow, that was an interesting fight. I mean, I knew technique boxing wise, actual boxing ability wise, it was going to be an interesting matchup. Joyce, I always kind of thought that he'd be past it from the, you know, the Zhang losses against Karshali. He looked very poor, looked like a punching bag, looked like he wasn't really too sure when to commit, how to throw his punches properly, and really kind of manipulate the power in which he has. I think he has the power to be able to be a really good boxer, but he just is so unsure of when to throw, how to throw, the technique to throw with. he just doesn't know what type of a boxer he wants to be. And as the much bigger guy against the Chisora, you do have to really keep the range, because Chisora, however shaky he looks at times, he is going to let his hands go in close and be able to do that pretty much the whole fight. And he did that. And to be able to score a knockdown against Joyce when Chisora fades into the later rounds, it was poor for Joyce. Do I feel like Joyce can get back to a top level? No. Do I feel like, he could retire? Yeah. Chisora, I would love to see him retire, because I think he is done more than enough for the sport, and he looks very shaky every time he fights. But it was really nice to see him get that win, and as a British boxing legend, in which he is realistically, it was really, a big thing for him, and impressive and entertaining. He's always bringing that entertainment, Del Boy. But yeah, moving on. Pacquiao drew versus Ampo. Pacquiao, I never really thought I'd see the day in which he came back. There was always talks about him coming back to the ring, but he's actually done it. And to be fair, it wasn't the worst performance. I mean, I've seen a lot of fighters come back for exhibition fights now, and they haven't looked too good. But that was a not a bad one at all. And obviously, he got the draw, and he was getting caught with shots and things like that. But there were still aspects of his game in which still looked like he could get around. Do I feel like I could be able to go and beat a Barrios? No chance. But like I say, he's still able to let his hands go and throw them explosive kind of combinations in which are difficult for anybody to deal with from which he used to do in his prime pro days. And it's just things like getting caught a lot, and movement on the ropes and things like that, and actual physical presence. Now I think he has gotten. I don't think he can move quite as well in which he once could, which is all fair enough. But at the same time, I don't mind seeing him in exhibition fights because he's not too old and things like that. But I don't ever believe that he can get back to beating a world champion. Moving on, Moriwaki won by TK round 3 versus Steve Lamy. Kanzakawa won by unanimous decision versus Fuhama. Iwasaki won by split decision versus Marino. Hanada won by unanimous decision versus Kondo. Kamada won by unanimous decision versus Nakagawa. Nakagawa won by unanimous decision versus Apollina. Tandoran won by TK round 9 versus Shigeoka to become IBF World Minimum Weight Champion. I did not get my prediction right for that one. That was surprising. From what I've seen, Shigeoka was cut and or damaged in the eye, and then Tandoran was just onslaughting a bit too much. Perhaps it was a little bit of an early stoppage, but at the same time, Shigeoka fought quite well, but when Tandoran put it on him, he was having success. And the difference between him and Amparo, which I said in my prediction, was that Tandoran was a lot more explosive and had a lot more left in his game. He proved that, and it was a very impressive win for him. And will we see a rematch? Probably, but at the same time, the amount of dominance in which we've seen from Japanese fighters at the lower weights, to see this defeat for Shigeoka, it's really kind of big, and it means the minimum weight division is one of the only divisions lower weight-wise, I believe the only one in which doesn't have a Japanese champion right now. If I'm correct in saying, so we've got Neomtron, Jerusalem, Collazo, and Tandoran. Am I missing one? Probably. But at the same time, like I say, it's big, and that kind of derails the hype behind the Shigeoka brothers a little bit now. And it will be interesting to see if we see a rematch or not. But Tandoran, full credit to him, coming to Japan and getting a win, stoppage win as well, is massive for him. And like I say, against the dominance in which Shigeoka we've seen from him, it's huge. And got my prediction wrong. I'll put my hands up, but full credit to Tandoran. Moving on, Van Hooter won via TK round 1 versus Kerr. Rosado Ortiz won via TK round 4 versus Dimitrieva. Gallegos won via TK round 4 versus Frauster. Garcia won via TK round 1 versus Hardy. Mason won via KO round 4 versus Guillermo. Pero won via TK round 5 versus Evans. Rivera Pizarro won via TK round 7 versus Goodson, and Gwynn has called out Cully. And that's all the boxing news. Moving on now to the MMA news. The 12-6 elbow rule has been removed. So the whole thing behind the Jon Jones loss, which was years ago now, Jon Jones wants to get rid of the loss and things like that. I mean, he probably won't because it was a long time ago now. But the rule's now gone, which is an interesting one. It was quite a dangerous elbow to throw, and there was a reason behind having the rule there. But obviously that's gone now. Will we see the knee, which is a similar type of knee, that kind of 6 to 12 type rule, be changed? Because if that's so, then that Yarn win versus Sterling, I saw somebody speaking about that. That would be a win then as well. So it's interesting. Will we see possibly big knockouts from that? Possibly, but it is a dangerous shot. So, but obviously it's been removed. I can't do anything about that. O'Malley versus Dvalishvili, Grasso versus Shevchenko 3, Ortega versus Lopez, Zelhuba versus Riboviez, and Rodriguez versus Osborne will fight September 14th. And to be honest, for the Sophia, it's not a massive card. It's, I know, going to be filled up with a lot of Mexican type fighters and things like that, but of course I am a fan of the main event. I'm really a fan of the main event. I've been wanting this fight for a long time. I'm a big fan of both fighters, and I think it makes for a really interesting, entertaining fight and entertaining build-up as well. So I think as a main event it had to be a big main event, and that does deliver as a big main event. But at the same time, I think Grasso vs Shevchenko 3 will be good. Ortega vs Lopez might be good, but then under that, it's not really a massive card for a UFC pay-per-view at the Sophia as well. But at the same time, I think the main event will live up to the billing, hopefully, so that will make it worth it. Moving on, Bannon won by decision versus Aurelian. Parkin won by KO round 1 versus Zaki. Patterson won by submission round 1 versus Crosby. Barskas won by submission round 3 versus Pacino. Elliott won by decision versus Parsons. Makayev won by decision versus Cape. Hadley won by decision versus Luran. Brazil won by decision versus McCann. Wood won by decision versus Pineda. Allen won by decision versus Chikadze. Rodriguez won by decision versus Leroy Duncan. Pimblett won by submission round 1 versus Green. Aspinall won by KO in round 1 versus Blades to remain UFC interim heavyweight champion. Mohammed won by decision versus Edwards to become UFC welterweight champion. And Mikhaev is reportedly being cut, from what Dana White said, from the UFC. So to speak about a few fights, as a big MMA fan, a big British MMA fan, I was really excited for this card, even though it was at the stupid time, in which was like 5-6 a.m. For UK fighters because of the whole America pay-per-view rule type thing. Speak about a few fights. Mikhaev, obviously, their build-up between him and Cape was intense. I was a big fan of Mikhaev. I think he has been really building a name for himself and is a quality fighter in which deserves a UFC title shot. But then I was very shocked to hear that Dana White is seemingly cutting him from the UFC. Obviously, I don't know everything about it. He said it was something to do with the matchmakers not really liking the style, the boring type style which he has. But I think there is probably something else going on behind the scenes, because being cut for having a boring type style when you're 7-0 in the UFC, I just don't see it. But PFL, as Dana White said, is going to have an excellent fighter, and I'd love to see Mikhaev go on to do great things in his career. If everything's okay with what he's done and things like that, I don't necessarily know if it's true or not what's happened, but yeah, it's an interesting one. It's a bit of a sticky one. Brazil versus McCann. McCann, I think she can be around for the UFC, but she's never going to be able to reach the top level. I think she could be a good gatekeeper type fighter, and she has a big following, and which is why she gets pushed onto these bills with the helps of course Paddy Pimblett and stuff like that as well. But I don't think she's ever going to be able to get to that point in which she was once perhaps spoke about being. But Brazil, really good performance from her though. Excellent timing on the shots. Really catching McCann coming in strong often, and was a dominant performance. Allen, really nice to see him get a decision win, get back to winning ways, and fan favourite for me definitely as well. Pimblett, submission around 1. I thought it would be possibly a tougher performance. I thought, somebody like a Green is an interesting fighter to be in against. His striking's a bit unorthodox, and he's quite got a bit of power to him, and he's going to be up for the fight. But Pimblett took him down really well when Green went for an interesting takedown. But yeah, at the same time, great submission as well. Really what was necessary for him to get into the rankings. And like I said, at the same time, do I feel like he's going to be able to go to a world level, or like the top level? Probably not. But he's made himself ranked. And at the end of the day, a guy from Liverpool built himself up really well through MMA and stuff like that, and has made a name for himself. I feel like that's more than warranted. It's just well, it's really full credit to him for being able to do that. But he's always going to get stick and things like that. Moving on, Aspinall, great KO vest plays. I feel like Aspinall on the feet, he has that underrated power. He's interesting on the feet because I feel like he does get caught and he looks quite awkward when he's throwing, but he also looks like he never really lands too clean. But he has that power in which it's interesting because it doesn't look too crazy like I've mentioned, and he looks strong, but he doesn't look as big as some of the other heavyweights we've seen. But he's just knocking everybody out, and that's full credit to him, and just the sharpness, I suppose, the timing, the precision of the work, even though it doesn't look too clean. Yeah, he's really building himself, and he had to get another big knockout win to stay at the top level here. And who do we feel like will fight next? He's called for a Pereira fight in a tournament type format where Jones fights Miocic and he fights Pereira. But Dana White seems to be keen for Pereira to stay around in the light heavyweight division, so I doubt we'll see that next. But at the same time, Aspinall, I don't want to see him just waiting around for Jones to fight Miocic. So I don't know who he could fight next. Maybe an Almeida, but it's not really a fight which people are calling for. Maybe a Gane. I don't know. It's a weird one for him at the moment. I don't necessarily know where he's going to go, but he's calling the big names, and the big names just are occupied at the moment, is what I'd say. Muhammad, that decision versus Edwards. Muhammad, full credit to him. I feel like he has definitely improved in his grappling and things like that from spending time, I believe, in Kazakhstan with Khabib and them lot. But Edwards looked poor. I feel like, I think he went into it. People have been calling his style boring and things like that. I think he went in it to prove a point, to prove that he's not, got a boring style and things like that. But he just wasn't using his timing as nicely. He had an impressive end to the fight, but other than that, Muhammad was landing nice strikes, catching him coming in when he's trying to trade, and Edwards isn't keeping the range as well as what he normally does. And Muhammad, like I say, in wrestling, it has improved as well. Full credit to Muhammad, but at the same time, he's not going to give Edwards a shot from what he said for a little while. So, who could he go on to fight next? If Gary fights Rakhimov, I don't know if he will. Rakhimov could fight Muhammad. Muhammad versus Usman. Do I feel like Usman's deserving of a title shot? No. So it's difficult. Covington, definitely, I don't believe he's ready for one yet. Well, deserving one right now. So, yeah, I feel like the welterweight division probably isn't in the best of positions right now. But, probably was better back in before when we had like the likes of Usman, Jorge Masvidal and things like that, and Covington in his prime as well. But right now, it's an interesting position to be in, and we'll have to wait and see what happens. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like if you're new, like this, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.